Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Second Act Actors. I'm your host, Dr. Janet McMorty, and I was and still am a medical doctor simultaneously trying to pursue a career in acting. My guest this week is Rudy Salo. Rudy was and still is a lawyer simultaneously trying to pursue a career in acting. We're like twins. He is a wonderful, fantastic human being. I'm so excited for you to hear this conversation. We have a lot in common. We talk about the whole idea of both of our first acts, medicine and the law, require you to go all in on the one thing, that tunnel vision focus towards the end goal of being a doctor, of being a lawyer. You have to, in order to get all the knowledge you need to have in order to be successful at these careers. And then, which is going to be a good thing, right? Malcolm Gladwell talks about having that one thing and the 10,000 hours and blah, 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 blah. But what I found personally is that having that one thing, that tunnel vision, meant that I couldn't bring in other loves of my life, and I had forgotten about them, and those parts of my brain had atrophied and gone away, and that's what leads to burnout. So we chat about that, and we debate a bit about that, the whole concept of having that one thing, and now do we go all in on the acting, or can we simultaneously do a bunch of things? He also had a prior kind of, I don't know what to call it, a career, but love of punk rock music, and that was me growing up, so we have a lot in common with that. Also, he's the first guest I've chatted to who plays the villain role. So he gets cast, again, kind of typecast as the villain, and he's laughing because he's like the nicest, friendliest guy, but gets cast as a villain, and he's just leaned into it. Originally he was kind of hurt by it, like, why am I this villain evil guy? But now he's found his niche. He is leaning into that villain jerk boss role. I loved this episode. God, Rudy and I have so much in common, meaning that we have great debates and banter back and forth. Please enjoy the lovely, non-villainous, but looks like a villain, Rudy Salo. First lawyer actor.
Well, I'm glad to be the first, but I can promise you I will not be the last, because as I have been acting for the past, 3.5 years, I've run into a number of lawyers. Now, the vast majority of lawyers that I've run into, except for maybe one he was in a student film I was in, and I killed him. That was my first villain role, and that was Intruder, and it was a lot of fun. We wound up becoming friends. He was still a practicing attorney like me. He just kind of acted at night. It was interesting. He was an entertainment lawyer. So what I do has absolutely nothing to do with entertainment, and that might be one of the reasons why I act. So I do government finance. And when you just hear those words, there's probably a part of your brain that shuts off automatically.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, it's the interesting thing about government finance, and I know you're up in Canada, and I've got Canadian relatives, and I've tried to tell my cousins that live there what I do, and they're like, we don't understand. It's because the vast majority of projects that are financed in Canada, it's either straight pay as you go, the Canadian government will just pay for it, or they will do public-private partnerships. Canada is very well known for P3s. Here in the United States, we the way that we finance the vast majority of our entire infrastructure is through municipal bonds. Also makes people sleepy and tired when they hear that term. But without municipal bonds, the United States wouldn't be what it is. I finance schools, roads, airports, hospitals, colleges, universities, sports stadiums. That's about the closest equivalent to entertainment as there is. And if you look behind me, there's a couple of deal toys up there from some sports stadiums that I've done. And anything and everything that you could think of, sewer pipes, sanitation systems, prisons, police stations, all that stuff is financed through municipal bonds, and that's what I do. I'm a municipal bond lawyer, and I either represent governments or nonprofits or financial institutions making loans to the government, and that's very unique to the United States because municipal bonds here are tax exempt. So if you own one, it's one of the legal tax shelters we have in the United States.
Okay.
The work itself is very rewarding, and the projects are even more rewarding, and the impact that it has is extremely rewarding. And the people that work in the industry are great. The underlying work can be incredibly boring. It just can be. I mean, it's just that you just have to accept that. And I've spoken about that. I've spoken about the fact that we don't have a lot of young people going into this area, and I've just tried to be perfectly honest. Like, hey, look, like you might think that the underlying work is boring, but it's very rewarding. My point being, you better go figure out something else that's going to excite you at night or on the weekends, because you got to kind of be in boring, read 10 to 20,000 words, sometimes pages a week, every day mode, and then you're able to go find some fun elsewhere. And so that's one of the many reasons why I got into acting.
So how do you go? So there's so many people that I chat with about their first act, and I mean, obviously you're simultaneously doing the first act and acting as well too, who are like, I could not find the joy in my first act. Right. So that's why I switched. Right. For you, I mean, you're very publicly saying it can be pretty boring, but how do you find that reward that you said? It is very rewarding in the end. How do you kind of get through the quote unquote boring stuff to find the reward?
The impact that it has.
Yeah.
I mean, really. I literally drive by projects and clients that I work on. I mean, when I see new transportation systems being built, new train lines, when I see a brand new museum built right across from my office, and when I see kids going to and from school, it's like, oh, I had a part in that. Like I helped make that happen, and I am a service oriented individual. So I think it's incredibly important that in whatever work that you do, you get some positive impact from it. Like you know why you go to work every day. You know why you're losing sleep or not seeing your kids or your wife or your loved ones, et cetera, et cetera. You got to know your why. Right? Like I know my why. My why is, well, I play a role in the building of the future of where people live and work. And so I get that. I mean, and we're, as a partner in a large law firm, I mean, we are also well compensated as well. That's another why. You got to feel like your time is being properly paid for. Especially after going to school, especially after taking out student loans, especially after bypassing other opportunities, where to make money, and that's you gotta take that into consideration, and it's interesting, right? Because like the type of work that I do, I'm well compensated. I get a lot out of it. And should I ever get those big roles in acting, which hopefully someday I'll get. I mean, if I don't get them now, that's fine. I got to put in my dues. I got to keep training. I got to network. I got to do the work. But at some point, I'm going to have to do an economic calculation of, well, what economically, what am I leaving on the table? What am I getting? Like, I got to think about my family. I got to think about, my future generations. I got to think about opportunity costs and make that calculation. I mean, right now, I don't get paid a lot from acting. Most of it's free. And in fact, sometimes I even turn down payment. I'm like, don't pay me. I don't even want to worry about the couple $100 or $1,000. I don't even want to worry about the filing of the taxes of that. I don't even want that. Just keep it. Go take that and use that towards marketing, please. And I just need the experience. So, I'm certainly trying to get as many roles as humanly possible. And someday I'd like to get paid, but that's not my goal right now. My goal right now is to just become a better actor.
Awesome. How did you get here? Tell me the story.
Yeah, it's a good one. In grade school, I happened to star in all the school plays, and it was great, and I loved it. Like, it was just like, Rudy, you're the star of A Christmas Carol or this act and that type of stuff. And I was like really passionate about acting. In fact, I remember a story of a very close girlfriend of mine in grade school. Our dream was to go to the Orange County School of the Arts. It had just kind of opened up around that time, and we were like, oh my God, wouldn't it be great if we went there? We didn't. She wound up going to the Catholic girls' school. I wound up going to the Catholic guy high school, and I had to commute via a bus to and from, because it's very far away from where I live. And the timing of the drama class was on Friday afternoons, and it cost extra money, and the timing just didn't work out. So it was my parents were just like, this isn't going to happen. Like, there's nobody that can take you to pick you up, and it's expensive, and your school's already expensive. And I just kind of like let it go. Got into music in high school and fell in love with music, channeled all my creative energy into it, and was in many bands, mostly punk bands, throughout high school and college. Absolutely fell in love with it. In fact, my parents said, we're not gonna let you move out of the house. We're not gonna pay for college unless you promise that you will become a lawyer. I said, fine, I'll become a lawyer. I had no intention of becoming a lawyer. I chose my first college because I was always going there every single weekend to see punk shows. I was like, I'm going to go there, and this is what I'm going to do. And I went to that school, and I was in a ton of bands, and it was such an exciting time. It was like the 1990s in Orange County, California, where you could go see Sublime and No Doubt for like $5. It was just such a great time to be into that scene. Something happened when I went to school. Once I realized that I could start picking my classes and studying the things that I was interested in, I fell in love with learning. And I actually fell in love with history, and I fell in love with politics, and I fell in love with how dysfunctional the world is and how am I going to help the world. And so I decided, okay, I actually transferred from that school to UCLA, which is one of the most premier, like usually number 1 or number 2 public university in the entire country, if not the world. And excelled at school, wound up at Georgetown Law, was going to become an international lawyer. My first legal job was in Mexico City. Lo and behold, after I returned back, go and interview for my legal jobs, and I was very focused on international jobs, 9/11 happened. And as an Arab American, that's a whole other side story that, I've spoken incessantly about on podcasts and I've written about. That had a whole impact on my life as well. But once 9/11 hit, I was just like, no way. Like, this world is just too dysfunctional. I gotta figure something out where I can have an impact, like here locally. Got a job in my hometown of Orange County. I was doing public law and liked it. Liked working with local governments. Liked working with schools. Unfortunately, I was doing a lot of litigation. And then when you're a litigator, that's when you're going to court. That's when you're filing arguments. That's also when you're buried in discovery. And you're a real lawyer. Like, that's a real lawyer. I didn't like it. Like, at all. I was the type of person that once a quote unquote case came across my desk, I wanted to call up the other side and settle it, figure out like, hey, how do I solve your problem, and how do we get to a place where we're both happy? Terrible attitude. That's like, you can't be that way. Got a recruiter phone call one day that said, hey, there's this new law firm that's opening up an office in LA, and they'll train a public law person to do public finance. And I was like, what the hell is public finance? They're like, oh, municipal bonds. I was like, oh yeah, sure, municipal bonds. I had no idea what municipal bonds were, but I knew that I wanted to give the law thing another try. Came here, I'm in the office now, and I was the first associate hired, and I helped build this office. That was the attractive thing. They're like, hey, you can help build this office. You'll be the first associate hired. That was 17 years ago, and I've been here ever since. And I really did and do still really enjoy public finance because of the impact that I have on communities, and the people that are in it are wonderful people, and I get a lot of joy from my work. But there's something critical that I got to point out. Before I went to law school, I literally put the bass guitar down and away, and I said, that's it. No more creative. I'm going to focus on this one thing only, and I'm going to master it, and I'm going to go for it. I'm going to figure it out, because I'm taking out massive amounts of student loans And that caused a lot of stress. So I was like, I'm going all in. And I did go all in. I did nothing creative at all for 10 years. Nothing at all. I just wanted to be really successful as a lawyer. And, that was my one thing, right? I listened to one of your episodes. It was the doctor episode that you had. And you had the doctor was talking about, the power of the one thing, and Malcolm Gladwell, 10,000 hours. Yep, I did that. Here's the thing. Around 2012, 2013, I was absolutely miserable. Totally miserable. I was successful, just made partner at the firm, was building my name, was very, very miserable. And at that time, I was also starting to speak at conferences. Realized I needed a lot of work on speaking at conferences. Like I'm a gregarious person, and I'm funny, but that doesn't necessarily translate into a good conference speaker. So I started taking public speaking classes again. I took a lot in college, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the performance aspect of it. Then I took an improv class, and that improv class led to a couple of acting classes. And I was taking a lot of writing at that time. And I always thought that I had an interesting life story with the punk rock and the Arab American in the 1990s and all the skinheads and white supremacists that we used to fight with back then. I just thought it was an interesting story, and I wrote a script. And it was very well received. In fact, we almost made a movie out of it. It was called White Like Me. COVID shut that down. But that led me to writing another script, and then writing another script. And then I realized, hey, I really enjoy writing. What's the best way to become a good screenwriter? Become an actor. So I started taking even more acting classes. And then I did stand-up comedy for a summer because I was a good speaker. And I was starting to podcast back then a little bit as a guest, but I knew I needed work to get to the next level. And so I did stand-up comedy for a year, and it was great because once you do stand-up comedy, the vast majority of your fear performance-wise absolutely goes away. When you're forced to stand in line and do open mic night, and I did open mic nights in LA. Whenever I would go to New York for work, I would do open mic nights, and you would eliminate that fear. There's a power to that. Didn't really enjoy doing stand-up comedy. It was just one of those things. It's like certain types of working out. Like you go and you work out. Sure, some exercises you get joy from, but other exercises that your body needs, i.e., like squats. Who really enjoys doing squats? But you have to do them. They're critical for your body. That's what stand-up comedy was like for me. It was like, hey, this is I'm not really enjoying this, but I'm becoming a better speaker, and I'm gaining more confidence, and I know my timing is getting better. And then, interestingly enough, my law firm put me into a how-to video, it was called Tech Hacks, and I took that video, and one of my buddies who saw me do stand-up comedy called me up and said, hey, you inspired me to get my daughter into acting. And actually, I threw my profile up on Backstage, and I've gotten a couple gigs. You should look into this. So I took that video that my firm did, and I put it up onto Backstage, and that actually led to a commercial, some small internet commercial. And then, so I got that reel, and those two reels together led to something else where I played a lawyer. And then I just built my reel that way, slowly but surely, and really fell back in love with acting. So that's the story. I know it's a little bit of a long one, but that was the process. There was just a lot of things that occurred. It was I was a creative person, then I suppressed that creative side of me, and that led to a lot of unhappiness. And then once I started exploring the creative side of me, happiness came back. Business success occurred, and then in the other endeavors, that success kind of has come as well. And I think what it all comes down to is happiness. I really believe that happiness is the key to success. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there that are miserable that are quote unquote successful, but if you're miserable, how successful are you? I don't know.
Take me back. Something kind of triggered in my brain that was interesting about your parents saying, kind of stop all this punk music and creativity and stuff like that. You better go be a lawyer. And then you wind up becoming a lawyer. Like,
Yeah, it's honest to God truth. That is the truth.
You're like, no, I'm not going to. Shoot, I did.
Yes. I mean, that is literally what happened. And my parents were, I mean, they didn't, I bought my own bass guitar. Like, my parents didn't really pay for, like, music stuff. Like, my parents put me in nothing growing up. Like, I don't know why. Like, I think at that time we were going through some financial issues, and I don't know. I didn't know how. My parents are immigrants. They're from the Middle East, and you know that has an impact on how you are raised and how you grow up. So all the interests that I've really had in my life, I've had to pursue and more or less pay for them myself. They didn't say stop music. They just said, we will not give you $1 and you will not be allowed out of the house unless you promise to become a lawyer. So I did promise to become a lawyer. I just didn't have any intent to become a lawyer. My intent was to become a musician. And I went all in on music. I really did. I was in so many bands, and I still have some of the recordings of it. But something happened. Once I started learning, punk rock actually had a huge impact on me. A lot of the bands, the Dead Kennedys, the Bad Brains, I mean, Bad Religion, all these bands are political punk bands, and they teach you how to think about inequities in the world and government lies and other types of things, and they teach you how to stand up for yourself and to think. And so the seeds of becoming a lawyer are from punk rock. Is just that wasn't watered. It was when I started to go to school and I got to choose the classes that I wanted to take based upon the punk rock songs that I was listening to. That watering, sprouted up, and I was like, I'm going to become a lawyer. Like, I don't want to become I was studying political science because of punk rock. Never wanted to become a politician. Will never become a politician. And so what you do with that is you become a lawyer. Like, it's pretty much kind of how it works. And so, yeah, it's kind of ironic and funny. Here's something else that's really funny. This is an honest-to-God true story. In the 3rd grade, I went to this Catholic grade school, and there was a time capsule that you had to write there. So there's under this dirt thing that I think that's going to open up in like 2030 or something. There's a card with my face on it, and you had to write down 3 things that you were going to be. And I wrote down tennis player, never held the tennis racket, but Nintendo Tennis was my favorite game. Wrote down basketball player because I was and am a huge LA Lakers fan, and I was the tallest kid in the class, but I suck at basketball. And then the 3rd thing, lawyer. I wrote down lawyer because, I don't know, maybe there was a movie that I watched the night before and there was a lawyer and he was performing in the courtroom or something. So it's kind of funny too, this my 3rd grade Rudy knew more about me than I knew, about myself when I was going into college and stuff. So the law thing has been there for a very long time.
Yeah. And I think what's really interesting, and I know I feel this in medicine as well too, is that we tend to, when we're in these very traditional careers, doctor, lawyer, police officer, right? We silo ourselves and say, the only thing I can be is the doctor. The only thing I can be is the lawyer. But I love what you're saying about all the creative influences that have come into what you now do. Because I don't know if, maybe people do that, but we don't hear about it that often. These creative influences that can be brought into a career that can be seen as not that creative, very right-brained. And I think where you can find so much joy is that. And like you were saying about happiness, right? Is if you can bring in that other side of your brain. But I think we're like stifled and said not to. Or it's kind of, I don't know, weirdly like, not shameful, but there's something that's kind of lesser than being like, yeah, a huge part of my influence in medicine is my improv background.
Oh, but, that's amazing.
Right? To say that, it sounds kind of hokey. But like same, I don't know if hokey's the right word. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's just, there's that feeling of arts is not, as good per se as like the illustrious careers that we have, but so much good can come from letting it infiltrate in instead of stifling it.
I agree. I mean, I'm sure you probably connect better with your patients and your fellow colleagues because you've opened up that side of your personality, and it's a very interesting part of you. And I feel, honest to God, I feel closer to my clients and I feel closer to some of my colleagues because I'm just like, yeah, I'm a creative person. Like, this is who I am. Like, you want to talk film? You want to talk music? You want to talk acting? You want to talk screenwriting? We could talk about all that other type of stuff, which will deepen our relationship better than if we just talk about the work that we do, right? If we're only going to talk about the work that I do for you or with you, that's a surface level relationship. Like, what? Like, really, what is that? Like, and how do you deepen a relationship with a client if you're only talking about work? Like, you got to talk about things that you're interested in and things that you are passionate about. And we, on Good Is in the Details, on a couple of episodes ago, we had somebody on that talked about she was the author of a book called Make Work Matter, and her whole premise was it is creativity that makes people happy. And if you want to be successful, you can't just be right brained. You got to use your whole brain. And when you use your whole brain, happiness will come out of that. But you have to take an expansive view of creativity. It can't just be acting. It can't just be music. It can't just be doing art. Like, coming up with a cool game with your kid is creative. Like, creating a business is creative. You are being creative by creating this podcast and bringing people on here like it. Like, that's very creative. And what happens is people out there say very terrible things to themselves because they'll be like, oh, I'm just not a creative person. Well, that's terrible. When you start thinking that way and you start talking to yourself that way in a negative way, you're limiting yourself. You're putting yourself into a box. And one of the messages that I like to get out to the world is stop saying that to yourself. Don't say you're not a creative person. Just expand your definition of creativity.
Yeah. I also really liked what you said, just because I connected with it, when you were talking about your time when you went all in becoming a lawyer. And I think I relate to that as a doctor because out of necessity, because of the schooling that we go through, like you're saying, immense amounts of student loans, you have to go all in. You have to tunnel vision yourself, right? You have
to. You have to.
But then that inevitably, I remember when I was in schooling and being like, yeah, this is what I'm gonna do, and I can do it till I'm 100, and it didn't take long for me to be like, oh, now I'm on a fast train to Burnoutville, right? Because that's the recipe for it, right? Is going all in on something and not letting other things come in. So is there anything that you've noticed you've pulled from that time being all in, as well as now from your being all in as a lawyer, but also now being a lawyer, that you've used towards your career in acting?
Wow, that's a really good question. I will say that yes, when I'm on a project, right? When I've gotten the role, and I know when we're going to film, and I know what is going to be needed from me, and it's not even just the role. In fact, because I still take acting classes, like when they say you got to do this monologue, or you got to do this scene, or you got to do that, I'm all in. Like, I will practice it every single day. I will set aside the time. I will not let my scene partner down. I will not let my teacher down. I will not let the director down. So once I'm tasked with something, I'm all in. And that's great. What's hard is translating that. And, I'd love your advice on this, to be honest with you. I certainly want this to be both ways. What I'm having some problems with is, when you're applying for a role, right? And these days with self-tapes, they already have the sides there, right? So like, hey, fine, you want to apply for this? You have to read all of these sides, and you have to, and then we'll take a look at it, and then we'll let you know. So it's not even like a callback. Like, you have to put in a lot of that work in order to for them to even give you the 5-second interview. I do find it hard for me to be all in on that because of my day job, because my wife, by the way, is a surgeon. She's a doctor, and she's gone all the time, and she's on call all the time. And we have 2 little kids. We got a 4-year-old and we got a 6-year-old. And so a lot of their care and stuff falls upon me. And I write, right? I contribute to Forbes.com, and I've got all these other things that are out there. And so I will say that it makes it very difficult for me to do that first, put in that tape versus an audition. If I get an audition, I mean, I'm going in, but so that's where I'm finding the struggle. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough. And I think there's also, I find the barrier of it being online. I find it very difficult to interact and have good work come out of me when it's online through a screen, because it's hard to make an emotional connection with a screen, right? It is really difficult. I think the biggest thing that helped me, and this probably isn't great advice because I know you already do improv, but was improv, because it allowed me to take my all-in logical brain, check the check boxes off my to-do list when I would get a set of sides, which in turn would lead to like robotic reading of a script. That produced creativity, but it allowed me to just feel a bit more like freedom just to play. And that kind of took pressure off. And also, I remember an acting coach telling me, she's also a casting director, being like, don't worry about the lines. Like, yeah, they're important, but to know the story. But I was so focused on getting like the exact correct wording, because in medicine, you have to have the exact correct wording.
In the law too.
Right?
I teach contracts at a law school, and I'm like, do you realize that this one word could lead to billions? I literally had this discussion with my students. I was like, I gave them an example. I was like, this one mess up led to billions of dollars in this law firm going out of business, and it was around for 100 years. And so it's like, great. I mean, that's great advice. So what you've heard is when you're doing that line reading for that app for applying to even get an audition, you'll go off script.
Yeah, and
that's okay.
So it's taken a lot, and I'm still not very good at it because my gut anxiety is having difficulty. But she's like, really and truly, yeah, you want to have most of the lines down. You can't just be, talking about an apple and it's actually an orange. But she's like, for the most part, one, those are probably fake sides anyway, and two, when we're seeing it as the casting director and as the director or script writer, usually it's the first time we're hearing those lines being said. So like, she's even changed lines on the fly. Like, she'll hear an actor say it and she'll be like, oh, I don't like that. That sounded weird. And then they'll just change it on the fly. So
great advice.
I want the character is key. The character, and the overall story. If you get that down, then she's like, that's all that really matters. Because most of the time, we don't even know what the sides are.
It's good. It's really good advice. I'm glad I brought this up, because I've been struggling with that. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Because that is hard for even me to stomach, because it's releasing control. Because you're like, great, now there's even less things I have to like check boxes off and put my right brain in. Oh God, now I have to rely on that like atrophied left brain that's been hasn't been used in a while. It's scary to go off, not so much like you said, not go off script, but to just rely on a character as opposed to following the algorithm. It's scary, but it does kind of make you free to do the creative stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Believe me, I love improv. I do. Like, some of the best roles I've ever done was when the director is like, this is just an outline. You actors take it to the next level. And I'm like, oh, yes. Like, obviously, I know the lines. Like, in order to do good improv, you actually need to know the lines. But if I can add some of me or my take on the character, or what I've created in my mind as the character, into that, I could take it to another level, in my opinion. When I've been told to strictly stick with the lines and told how to say the actual word, it's very difficult for me. It is difficult for me. I know I need to learn that, and that's why I'm taking the classes. That's why I'm working my ass off. I'm doing the work. Oh, that's another thing. There's another thing that you said. How did that all inness translate? I am doing the work. I am trying to take, I will take any class, anytime, anywhere. I will take any job, anytime, anywhere. I don't care. I will do background. I like the people. I think fine. I love being on set. I love being around it. Now, sometimes when I'm on set, actually usually when I'm on set, I have to work because I have a day job. And thankfully my day job, all I need is a phone and a laptop, and I can do it anywhere in the world. And so sometimes I'm not able to totally interact with actors, but I love it. Like I love being around it. Like it brings me a lot of joy to just be around it, because I'm watching people create something from nothing, and it's, so yeah, that passion, that all-inness, I do try to translate that to every day in I'm gonna do something every single day, whether it's I'm gonna do an audition, or I'm gonna read some more Uta Hagen, or I'm gonna watch a YouTube video on how to this, or I'm gonna work on my resume, or I'm gonna network. I do something every single day. I do.
And I think that, and I know that we've kind of already touched on this, but so much of that can make your day job so much more enjoyable.
Oh, totally.
Right? Like it
does.
It makes it bearable, which sounds like I'm being a bit of a negative Nancy, but it does, right? Because there are things to look forward to, I find, if my day job isn't going well, as some days it doesn't. But it also, like you're saying, it makes you connect more with the other people within your job, because you just become a more well-rounded human being.
Yeah, and I just gave a presentation yesterday to younger associates on business development. I talk a lot about that at my firm, and through my journey of focusing and then trying to translate that into finding joy and being healthy and getting happiness, I'm getting that message across to young lawyers, because it's daunting. Like it is, those first 7 to 10 years of being a lawyer, in particular in a large law firm, is crushing. Like once you've been through that, like it's kind of like stand-up comedy. Like you work at a law firm for more than 15 years or 10 years or whatever it is, you can pretty much do anything because you've been through a lot. Like you've already given up your life. Like you don't have one anymore. Like there's no vacations. Your phone's on you all the time. You kind of got to be on all the time. And so you got to learn how to balance that. You do need to learn how to put it into a box. You do need to learn how to put people in check. Clients, senior partners, be like, hey, I'll get to that I'll get to that in blah, blah, blah time. Always have to be responsive, but you got to take agency over your own life, yet have people still depend on you. And you're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to say no with a smile and no with respect unless you're an actual happy person. What happens is with the burnout is when you've been pushed too far and you keep saying yes, 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 but that one time you say no because you're burned out and you're unhappy and you blow up, you're going to burn bridges. Just it happens. So you gotta, so learning how to do that, right? Learning how to become happy and getting joy from whatever it is will translate into business success in whatever you're doing. 100%. It just will.
Yeah. And that leads very nicely into the question I want to ask. Do you have any advice for somebody who wants to either switch into acting or is having that trouble getting out of the tunnel visioned all in and is feeling like they're burning out?
It depends. Yeah, you know what? I just said that on purpose. You want to know why? You know what lawyers always say? The number one thing that lawyers, whenever you call up your lawyer and you ask him a question, right? The first two words out of his or her mouth is, it depends. And so it depends. It literally depends where you are in your career or in whatever that is. Are you ready to take on something else? Like, have you mastered your career enough where you're like, I can also act. Like I can do that. And, for lawyers, like I suggest that they probably go all in on the law for 5 years or 7 years, maybe not the whole 10 years like I did, but I really do think it's important to do that. Here's the reason why. financial stability is an amazing stress relief, and being financially stable opens up so many doors creatively. And that's because you can afford the classes. You can afford the headshots. You can afford to do all of that free work that you're going to have to do for years, right? And I'm talking about the vast majority of people. Yes, there are unicorns. Like my buddy that put his face up on Backstage, he started getting work like immediately. He's got a very niche look, and he just nailed it. Like, he's making tons of money at it. He was lucky, but the vast majority of people are not him. And he's fine just doing commercials. He's not really into acting. He just likes being a face, and it's all good. But and he's very financially stable too. So he would agree with me 100%. He's like, dude, I wouldn't have done acting if I wasn't financially stable. I was like, no way. Financial stability is huge. It really, really is. And building credit, right? Like owning a home or having some real estate or being able to borrow, because maybe someday you're going to have to live off of that. So I think it's vitally, vitally important to choose a career, get some financial stability, and then once you've built your name up there, and then you get that leeway, right, where clients trust you and customers trust you or patients trust you or your organization trusts you, then at that point you got to take advantage of that freedom, right? You built up that name, you built up your street cred. Are you not going to cash in that street cred and do something that's going to make you happy? Are you just going to be like, building up more street cred? Like, let's, do if you know there's something that you want to do, acting, music, whatever, take that street cred and use it. So I do think financial stability is huge. I don't know if there's a lot of people out there that talk about that. I think it's huge. What I'm worried about is the gig economy that we have these days. Everybody is an independent contractor. Oh, I'll just do Uber, or I'll do this, or I'll deliver that, and I'll just do that, and I'll do all of my other stuff at night, and then I'm going to go for it. That's great. Because maybe you're going all in on the acting stuff, and God bless you. You know what? I pray to God that you're going to be one of those success stories. I'm not trying to be a negative Nelly here. Like, I really, really, really hope that. But I see a lot of people that, after I've gotten to know over a number of years, that like they're in their later 30s, they're in their 40s, they're in their 50s. They still don't have financial stability underneath them. And when they do need to get some headshots, or they do need to do something, or they do need to take free gigs, they can't. And so I really do believe trying to get some kind of financial foundation underneath you is important. So I would highly recommend that to anybody. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, and I think there's something about the starving artist mentality that is still existing. I think it's probably slowly kind of regressing away, but there's this idea that you have to starve as an artist to struggle for your work and struggle for your craft, which I completely disagree with for that exact reason. And it's like, it's almost like if you have financial stability, you're not really an artist, you haven't starved for your craft, which is such bull.
It is bull.
Right? Like, I don't know where that mentality came from, why it came around, but it frustrates me because it makes people think that they can't treat themselves like the business that they are.
That's exactly what I told my associates yesterday was, by the way, have any of you wanted to own a business someday? It was silent. They're like, what the hell's this dude talking about? Like, we're a bunch of lawyers. I was like, no, you're wrong. See? Yeah. You are a business. Mm-hmm. You are a business. Every single one of you is a business, and you better start thinking that way. Because if you're not, you're gonna be owned by some other person's business, i.e., somebody else's. Somebody's gonna own your time. So if you don't own yourself, you're never gonna have the freedom to do. That freedom is financial stability, in my opinion.
Yep. Yeah, and I think as soon as people realize that, there's also a shame, I think, that comes, shame's the right word, but that feeling of, you can't admit, like you're bragging if you have financial stability or something like that, but you're like, no, like this will allow you to feel more comfortable and confident in your ability to produce art or to produce in whatever you want. Yeah.
Amen.
I'm a huge believer in that as well, too. I think it's all garbage.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, look at the impact that you've had as a doctor, like the lives that you've already impacted, and you got to feel good. Like, should you make the full-time switch into acting, and there's still that party, because I know my wife's a doctor. There's that party that's like, I gotta help the world. I gotta save people. You know that you've already done that. You've done your penance. I mean, doctors are, public agents. The way the doctors are paid these days and the way they're treated and disrespected, like they're so vital and important to our society these days, and we need more doctors. And I worry about the future of medicine. I do. I really worry about it. So does my wife. Yeah. But just know that you've already done your great work. So if you ever question that, you don't have to. You've done great things for people.
Huh. That's yeah, I love that. It's a really motivational thing to hear that I haven't heard, right? And I think that means a ton. Appreciate that.
It's the truth.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Is there anything, you kind of already answered this question, but is there anything that you found really surprising about acting?
Yes. Yeah. I didn't know. I didn't intend to be a really damn good villain. I didn't intend it. I didn't want it, and I'm still struggling with it. And the way I found out that I'm a good villain is an interesting story. One of the first big gigs that I got, probably the first time I got paid, was for a podcast of all things. It was called Deliberations, and it was season 4, and it's an improv podcast. And I had to audition in person. It was amazing. It was such an awesome thing. I played Alex, the jury foreman, on season 4 of Deliberations. It's a great season where we talk about cults, and the director was there was some interesting, because we were all actors, some interesting players in the room, and the director would it was improv, but she would like write me notes and be like, hey, you need to put this person in check, or I want you to do this and I want you to do that. And after all those years of being in a law firm and dealing, negotiations and all that other, like, you just kind of, you just get this way of talking, right? Like, you have this confidence, and you gotta, like, I'm right, type of thing. And this podcast had a really big fan base. I didn't realize that I was like being intense. I thought I was just kind of being myself, and I thought I was in the right. And then I would read like the little reviews of the fans on it, and everybody hated me. Like everybody hated me, and I was like, oh my God, but I'm not the villain here. That guy was the villain. You should have seen all this other type of stuff. And I struggled with it for a year. Like I literally, it hurt my feelings. And then I was like, you know what? Forget it. I'm leaning into this. I'm a bully. Fine. I'm gonna be a villain. Those are the roles. That's my niche. Okay. You Deliberations audience people, you've helped me find my niche. And then I started picking up more villain roles. Because I started applying for them. And yes, I do take the intensity of my day job as a law firm partner and bring that into my roles. I do that. And that tends to come off in roles where they're the jerk boss. I swear to God, I'm a sweet guy. My kids love me. My friends love me. My coworkers love. I mean, I'm serious about that. But yes, I could tap into intensity like that. And so that was the thing that was surprising to me. The villain, how long it would take me to kind of accept that about myself, and then leaning into it. And that's my niche. I mean, in LA, you talked about on that last episode, it's not a small market, it's a large market. You got to figure out your niche. And my niche is that. Like, I'll play the villain, and I love it. And in fact, if I only got those roles for the rest of my life, I'd be perfectly happy with that.
Is there anything you're looking forward to this year? Anything coming up for you?
Hopefully, right now, for the first time in like over a year, I was just in something like 2 days ago, and then I was in something like a week ago. I don't have anything right now, and so I'm looking forward to what my next gig. I don't care what it is. I just want a gig, because as an actor, right? Isn't that what you're constantly thinking about? Like, if you don't have one, you're like, oh, it's over. It's done. I'm never gonna work again. It's finished. I suck. So I'm looking forward to my next gig. What about you?
Yeah, same thing, right? Would they keep telling, my agent keeps saying, it's getting so busy in Toronto. And I'm like, I haven't seen it yet. But that's okay, right? You just keep prepping and keep working with classes and doing the improv so that you're ready when the onslaught happens, right? It's training for a marathon,
Amen.
not a sprint.
Amen. Amen. And last year I climbed my first big mountain. It was the Mount Whitney here in California. And I trained for that for like a year. And that's exactly what it was. Like, it was every time I would work out, every time I would climb a mountain, these small little hills, it was like, well, it's not Mount Whitney, but every little tiny thing that I was doing in training, it was in preparation for that. And that's the mentality that I have to keep with. So thank you. That's very helpful.
Well, and it's such a thing about the acting industry that I don't think exists in a lot of other places, is how you never know what can happen, and it's fast turnaround, right? So you have to be like in the sprinter blocks, like ready to go, because like I got a voiceover audition like 2 days ago that was due like 3 hours later, and you're like,
that's so hard.
Okay, here we go,
right?
Right?
Especially with our day jobs, and I actually like to do the scenes with my wife when she's home, and she's not home until late at night. And sometimes when I get those urgent ones, I got to do them on my own. They just don't sound as good.
Yeah. It's hard to find that balance, I think, when you are balancing simultaneously pursuing two different careers. But I think that's also where we can thrive, right? Because I think in high stress situations, I think we can handle it, right?
Easily.
And like you're saying with the stand-up, like that's the most terrifying thing in the world. I have yet to try it. It's definitely on my bucket list because that exact thing, right? There's
Janet,
no fear left.
Promise me that you'll do it. I swear. I can already tell you're an awesome person. You don't look like you have any fear, but it takes you to this whole other level of confidence that can never be matched.
That's so cool.
And do it for a year. Do it for a year. Don't just take a class. Do it for a year. Go to open mics. Be cool with the crowd not laughing, because I had one good night. I had only one good night. It was actually pretty much after that night I was like, you know what, if I never do stand up again, I'm good. But you got to be cool with that. It'll change your life, I promise.
That's awesome. And I've heard that from a couple other people I've chatted with who've done stand-up, as they've used it as a tool for their acting craft. And they've usually come from a background kind of like yours, public speaking. I talked to a guy who's a pastor, and he now does stand-up comedy. Huge
Amazing
correlation, right? You
Huge.
have an audience, and sometimes they don't like you, right? So you have to adapt. And I'm excited. I think it's definitely one of those bucket list things that just needs to go all in and just do it.
That's awesome. You know what? When I did stand up, I went all in on that too. I really did. I was another thing. It was another translated thing. I did go all in on it and then I was done. I did go all in 100%.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you have any final words of wisdom or anything to kind of share?
The only thing I could share is that do what makes you happy, but be realistic about it. I mean, you get to, you said to be financially stable, and then you said to be do what makes me happy. Yeah. You also kind of got to be realistic. I mean, our world and our economy and everything is ever changing. I will tell you, if you're financially stable, and that's when you're going to get your happiness, and that will open up so many more doors for you. I truly believe in that, and I loved what you said about the struggling artist. I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, you said it best. That's the best advice.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and thank you, Rudy, for being my guest this week. Thank you for the fantastic conversation, the wonderful insight, words of wisdom, and the great debates and banter back and forth. I loved chatting with you. Again, we have so much in common, and I appreciated just the kind of scientific, deep dive, technical debates we had. It was fantastic. Also, thank you for reminding me how much I loved punk rock music growing up and still do. I just haven't listened to it in a long time. I'm about to go on a training run, and I think I'm gonna, dig out some of the old, I was about to say CDs, but you know what I mean. Look up some of the old bands God, punk rock music was great, especially in the 90s. Oh, good times. Thank you everyone again for tuning in, and I hope you'll join me again next week for another episode of Second Act Actors. Bye!